The female role and feminine aspect of spirituality. Women in Tamil Shaivism and folk deity worship. The Bhakti movement, which emerged in different parts of India, was not only a spiritual awakening, but also a response to rigid social structures. It provided a direct and personal connection to the divine, often challenging the dominance of Brahmanical orthodoxy. Within this broader movement, Shaiva Bhakti played a crucial role, giving rise to deeply devotional traditions that emphasized love and surrender to Shiva. Among the earliest groups associated with Bhakti are the Shaiva Nayanars, a group of 63 Tamil Hindu saints living during the 6th to 8th centuries Common Era. The Nayanars often rejected caste discrimination and upheld the equality of all Shiva devotees, regardless of their caste or social background. The Nayanars came from diverse backgrounds, including those considered lower caste or even outcast within the rigid Brahminical system, such as Nandanar, Thirunalaipovar, yet they were equally venerated as saints. The Tevaram hymns composed by the first three major Nayanars, Apar, Sambandar, and Sundarar, became the foundational sacred music of Tamil Shaivism and were recited in temples much like Vedic hymns. Over time, these hymns were set to Pan, an ancient Tamil musical system analogous to raga, and were performed in temples by a class of singers known as Oduvars. In general, the Bhakti movement often emphasizes both poetry and music as expressions of deep emotional devotion and longing for the divine, with each tradition shaping its own artistic and spiritual forms. Among these, Vaishnavism particularly embraced music, chants, and dance as central elements of worship, using them to evoke a deep sense of connection with the divine and to inspire communal participation in devotion. The Bhakti movement primarily spread through oral traditions, and its poems were not necessarily pre-written, but often extemporaneous expressions of devotion, particularly among the wandering saint poets, including the Nayanars. Improvisation played a key role in their devotional practice, much like in other Bhakti traditions, where poets sang in a state of divine inspiration. The Tevaram hymns and later the Tirumarai became the core of Tamil Shaivism's sacred literature, and probably also originated in a deeply experiential form of devotion or as profound revelations. Among the 63 Nayanars, there were 3 women known as Isainyan-yar, Karaikal Ammayar, and Mangayar Karasiyar. Karaikal Ammayar, one of the 63 Nayanars, is among the earliest known female poet saints of Shaivism. Born as Punithavati in the prosperous port city of Karaikal, Tamil Nadu, she was deeply devoted to Lord Shiva from childhood. She was married to Paramadatta, a wealthy merchant, and fulfilled her household duties with devotion. One day, her husband sent her 2 mangoes, which she carefully stored. As she was preparing the meal, a Shaiva ascetic arrived at her home. She had nothing more to offer him except a mango, so she offered him one. Later, when Paramadatta returned and ate the first mango, he asked for the second. Since she had already given one away, she prayed to Lord Shiva, and miraculously another mango appeared in her hands. Upon tasting it, Paramadatta realized it was no ordinary fruit. It had an ethereal taste. When she confessed the truth, he was overwhelmed with reverence and began to see her as more divine than human. Recognizing that she was no longer bound to worldly life, he left her, moving to another city, remarrying, and referring to her as a goddess. Now free from worldly ties, Punitavati renounced her former life and prayed for a unique boon from Shiva. She wished to take on a skeletal pay form, symbolizing her complete detachment from the material world. She did not seek physical beauty or earthly pleasures, but instead wished to transcend the body and ego entirely, dedicating herself solely to Shiva. Shiva, pleased with her devotion, granted her wish, and she took on the emaciated form of a Pei, ghostly being, which was considered a mark of supreme renunciation. However, her transformation was not a curse, but a profound symbol of her spiritual attainment. A soul that had overcome the cycle of birth and death and found complete oneness with Shiva, embodying the essence of Bhakti and Shaiva ascetic ideals. She became known as Karaikal Ammayar, Mother of Karaikal, wandering in devotion and composing hymns in praise of Shiva. In her poetry, particularly in Arpuda Tiruvandadi and Tiruvalangadu Mutha Tirupathigam, Karaikal Ammayar vividly describes Shiva's Bhikshatana cosmic dance in the cremation grounds, where all worldly distinctions disappear, serving as a reminder of the ultimate reality, that all forms are temporary, but divine consciousness is eternal. Karaikal Ammayar's Bhakti was marked by an ascetic and even eerie aesthetic, reflecting extreme renunciation similar to early Pashupada ascetics. Her devotion was deeply personal, embodying the essence of Bhakti traditions, yet it was centered on the fierce, awe-inspiring form of Shiva. In this, her approach differed from later Nayanar poetry and mainstream Bhakti traditions, which placed greater emphasis on the grace and benevolence of the deity rather than their fierce and awe-inspiring aspects. Mangayarkarasiyar, another one of the revered Nayanmars, was a queen of the Pandya dynasty, 7th century Common Era, known for her devotion to Shaivism and her role in reviving Shiva worship in Madurai during a time when Jainism was dominant. She was married to Pandya king Kun Pandyan, who had embraced Jainism. Deeply distressed by the decline of Shaivism, she invited Thirugnana Sambandar, a renowned Shaiva saint, to Madurai. Through Sambandar's miracles and debates, the king reconverted to Shaivism, and Mangayarkarasiyar is remembered for her wisdom and political influence, which helped restore Shaivism in the kingdom. Mangayarkarasiyar is remembered more as a literate leader and devoted patron than as an ascetic or accomplished spiritual practitioner, as is often the case with other Nayanmars. However, her story stands as historical testimony to the influence of women on an entire tradition. Although women's roles in spiritual traditions of that time were often secondary, Mangayarkarasiyar's actions reshaped the religious landscape of the entire region, bringing about the revival of Shaivism, which perpetuated her memory among devotees. There are very few historical records about another woman recognized in the Nayanar tradition, Isaijnaniyar. While no poetry, personal experiences, or miracles are attributed to her, which are often characteristic of other Nayanmars, she is revered for her unwavering devotion to Lord Shiva. Isaijnaniyar is best known as the mother of Sundarar, one of the most prominent Nayanmar saints. Sundarar was born to Sadayanar and Isaijnaniyar, who were deeply devoted and virtuous. Recognizing the divine qualities in the child, King Narasingha Munayar took him under his care and raised him, ensuring that he received guidance befitting his spiritual destiny. As we can see, though there are only 3 women among the Nayanmars, their presence encapsulates different spiritual roles that women were capable of embracing, transcending the gender prejudices often imposed by society. Karaikal Ammayar stands as a practitioner and an example of spiritual realization. Mangayarkarasiyar is distinguished by her devotion and her ability to guide and inspire many on the spiritual path, while Isaijnaniyar is honored as the mother of the illustrious Saint Sundarar. The legacy of the Nayanars shaped the direction of Shaiva traditions in Tamil Nadu and beyond. Their poetry, collectively known as the Tirumurai, became the foundation of Tamil Shaivism, serving as both scripture and inspiration for later generations. The devotional movement they championed laid the groundwork for later Bhakti Shaiva traditions, such as the Virashaivas, Lingayats, and the Shaiva Siddhanta school, which systematized their teachings into a philosophical framework. In Tamil Nadu tradition, women saints and poets were often called Ovayar or Avvayar, meaning respected woman in Tamil. Although the name is not a general one and applies only to specific female saints, it is also an archetype of the elderly wise woman, and many Tamil poetesses have borne this title. Apart from the already known saints, the Nayanmars, the Tamil region, throughout different centuries, was rich in many holy women who conveyed their wisdom through poetry and sayings. Among the Ovayars were poetesses who arose in different centuries, both before and after the Nayanmars. One of the most notable was a poetess of the Sangam period, circa 1st-3rd century Common Era, who was one of the greatest contributors to ancient Tamil literature and is considered the first Alvayar. Born into a family of wandering minstrels, the Sangam-era Alvayar grew up immersed in the rich oral traditions of Tamil poetry and storytelling. When she reached marriageable age, she sought divine intervention and prayed to Lord Ganesha to prevent her marriage. According to legend, Ganesha answered her plea by transforming her into an elderly woman, discouraging any potential suitors. Freed from societal expectations, Alvayar embraced a life of simplicity and wandering. She traveled across Tamil lands, choosing to reside among common folk, offering guidance and composing poetry that conveyed profound wisdom in simple words. The second Ovayar is considered the medieval Ovayar, sometimes referred to as the Chola Ovayar, as she was closely associated with the Chola dynasty. The medieval Ovayar was a great Shaiva poet and moralist, known for composing works such as Atichudi, Kondrai Venden, Mudhurai, and Nalvaji. She was deeply devoted to Lord Murugan, the son of Shiva, and is famous for her interaction with him in Tamil legends, where he tested her wisdom. According to legend, one day, the aged poetess, the Chola Avayar, while traveling through the Tamil lands, grew tired and stopped under a large fruit-bearing tree, a jamun, navel tree. Feeling hungry, she wished to eat some of its ripe fruits. As she rested, she noticed a young cowherd boy sitting in the tree. She asked him to shake the branches so that some fruits would fall. The boy, with a mischievous smile, asked her, "Do you want the fruits hot or cold?" Ovayar, confused by his question, responded, "What foolishness is this? How can fruits be hot or cold?" The boy simply smiled and shook the tree. A few fruits fell to the ground covered in dust. As Ovayar picked them up, she instinctively blew on them to remove the dust. Seeing this, the boy laughed playfully and remarked, "Ah, grandmother, so the fruits are hot, and that's why you are blowing on them." At that moment, Ovayar realized that this was no ordinary cowherd boy. He was none other than Lord Murugan himself, testing her intelligence and humility. Immediately she bowed before him, recognizing his divine form. When Ovayar looked up, the boy had vanished. This sweet story is highly symbolic. Pride and neglect arose in Avayar's mind for a moment. She thought that the boy was illiterate and that she was more knowledgeable and reasonable. This incident made her realize that no one should be underestimated and that one must not succumb to pride. Murugan's playful question teaches that even the wisest can still learn. The legend also reflects Murugan's role as the giver of divine wisdom, often testing and guiding devotees toward greater spiritual realization. Murugan has deep roots in the folk traditions of Tamil Nadu, and he is strongly associated with its identity and culture. He is believed to be one of the oldest deities worshipped by the Tamil people. His worship evolved and was later integrated into mainstream Hindu traditions, as we will discuss later, but he remains a central and unique figure in Tamil religious life. The traditional accounts of multiple Alvayars suggest the existence of at least 4 poetesses with the same name, spanning different historical periods. However, the details about the 3rd and 4th Alvayars are much less clear, and are mainly preserved through oral traditions rather than historical records. Some accounts mention that another 3rd Alvayar lived between the 5th and 10th centuries and was highly respected for her spiritual wisdom and influence. She is said to have played a crucial role in bringing peace between the Chera, Chola, and Pandya kingdoms, which were often at war. A later 4th Alvayar is believed to have lived around the 15th century, closer to modern times. Since the stories, legends, and poetry of the Alvayars are spread across different periods, forming a precise picture of each individual poetess is challenging. However, the Alvayars endure in Tamil history as a collective archetype of the wise old woman, transcending individual biographies and embodying the timeless reverence for feminine wisdom itself. As we have seen, figures like Karaikal Ammayar, the Alvayars, and other eminent women poets left a profound impact, not only on the spiritual landscape of the region, but also on the moral, ethical, and literary heritage of India as a whole. Their contributions were expressed through legends, poetry, and spiritual guidance, shaping the devotional culture of Tamil Nadu. In addition, the Tamil region is not only known for its women's spiritual and intellectual contributions, but is also rich in stories of strong, heroic women, warriors, and protectors. Moreover, women's influence was not limited to the Shaiva tradition. For instance, in the Vaishnava tradition, Andal stands out as one of the 12 Alvars, demonstrating that women held a vital place in various streams of Tamil devotional movements. However, the role of women in the Vaishnava tradition will be explored in a separate video. Thus, we see that women played a role in all aspects of life, including the spiritual sphere, despite societal constraints on their public roles. Although historical narratives have often shifted emphasis away from them, often aligning with dominant Brahmanical norms, their contributions remain undeniable, and no prejudice can erase their place in history. Although Brahminical narratives and the injunctions of the Dharma Shastras imposed restrictions on women's roles in the spiritual sphere, the folk traditions of Tamil Nadu provided a space where women played integral roles in spiritual practices. Folk traditions in Tamil Nadu, particularly those associated with village deity worship, predate Vedic times in general. However, these guardian deities were later identified with early forms of Shiva and Parvati, or other Puranic deities. Similarly, Alvayar was sometimes seen as an aspect of Saraswati or Shakti, embodying wisdom, poetry, and guidance. Before the processes of Brahmanization and Puranization, women in Tamil Nadu had a more inclusive and active role in religious and spiritual life. These folk traditions, especially those associated with Shaivism and village deity worship, Gramadevata, often highlighted the significance and power of female deities, while also emphasizing the prominent roles of women as priestesses, oracles, Velichapad, healers, and active participants in the rituals. The officiants at village and family temples were typically called pukaris. They were villagers with whom the temple's deity had established a spiritual connection, often through a form of spirit possession. In particular, women pukaris or Aman priestesses often had the authority to initiate key rituals. which were deeply connected to the power of the mother goddess, such as Mariamman, Angala Amman, Isaki Amman, and others, to protect the village, heal the sick, and ensure prosperity, along with other aspects associated with the roles of female deities in Tamil folk beliefs. The priestesses' work extended beyond the temple into the community, where they played vital roles as healers, particularly in dealing with illnesses and ailments that were believed to be caused by evil spirits or negative forces. Through their deep connection to the divine, these women were considered capable of channeling the goddess's energy to restore balance and health. As oracles, Velichapadu, they also entered trance states during rituals, believed to speak the words of the goddess and offer guidance to those seeking spiritual or physical healing. In this way, the role of Amman priestesses in Tamil Nadu was not only central to religious practices, but also reflected a broader cultural understanding of the sacred feminine as powerful, protective, and life-giving. The Tamil Nadu traditions had their own distinctive and unique features, but over time they too were assimilated into the broader Hindu framework through the processes of Brahmanization and Purinization. Many independent gods and goddesses were absorbed into Brahmanical traditions, taking associated and sometimes secondary positions in the pantheon of Hindu deities. Originally a Tamil war god, Murugan was later identified with Kartikeya, Skanda, the son of Shiva and Parvati in Puranic literature. Similarly, many village guardian deities, Kaval Devam, were reinterpreted as sons of Shiva or at times as his Ganas, attendants. Many female guardian deities, Amman goddesses or Gramadevata, were originally independent mother goddesses, but over time they were linked into the Devi tradition. For example, Mariamman, Kotravai Amman, Isaki Amman, Angala Amman, and Periyachi Amman were later identified with aspects of Parvati, Durga, or Kali. However, despite the overarching process of Brahmanization and Purinization, many folk traditions in Tamil Nadu preserved their distinct identity, including the active role of women in religious and spiritual practices, where women continued to serve as oracles, Velichapad, healers and devotees of Amman deities. It is worth emphasizing that some communities in ancient Tamil Nadu, as well as certain later Ambalavasi Shakta groups that later identified with various castes, adhered to a form of matrilineality where lineage, inheritance, and social identity were traced through the mother. Some communities resisted complete assimilation into Brahmanical structures, preserving their original matrifocal and shamanistic aspects. In many Tamil villages, Amman deities continued to be worshipped outside Brahmanical norms. However, the influence of these traditions on one another undoubtedly occurred, leaving an imprint on the broader Indian religious landscape. Thus, the worship of the Amman goddesses in Tamil Nadu, with its focus on the divine feminine and its emphasis on associated rituals, contributed to the development of later Shakta and Tantric traditions within Hinduism. However, it is worth noting that the worship of mother goddesses is not exclusive to the Tamil region or South India. Such traditions exist across India in various forms, manifesting under different names, attributes, and characteristics. Moreover, the archetype of the mother figure, as well as the wise old woman like Ovyar, is found in almost all cultures and traditions far beyond India. However, we have strayed quite far from the topic of Bhakti. We began with the Nayanars and Tamil Shaivism, then delved into village deity worship and nearly into Shaktism. Perhaps the traditions of Shaktism will be explored in other videos, but for now let us return to Bhakti, which had an incredible reach across India and manifested in various forms of devotional expression. Building on our discussion of the Nayanars and the Shaiva traditions of Tamil Nadu, The next video will delve into the evolution of Bhakti Shaiva Sharana traditions, where we will examine how these movements carried forward and expanded the devotional ideals first sung by the Nayanars.